Hello, everyone, and welcome. Sorry, I had some camera issues, so hopefully we don't lose the feed. It was not connecting earlier, but it seems to be working now, so we'll dive into Act 5, Scene 1 of William Shakespeare's Hamlet and hope that it holds out for 300 some odd lines. So where we last left off was quite some time ago, but if you remember, Hamlet is on his way back from England. He discovered the plot to have him executed when he arrived to England and not just banished, ran into some pirates that allowed him to get back. And Ophelia has died in that time in between. Hamlet does not know yet that Ophelia has died. And that picks us up in 5-1. We start with two individuals digging graves, or at least one grave digger. Some versions refer to them as clowns. From I think it's the folio or the first quattro uses clowns instead of grave diggers. So you see that sometimes. But they're digging graves and they're funny. So either one works. Gravedigger asks, is she to be buried in Christian burial when she willfully seeks her own salvation? So there's our argument. Is this woman supposed to be buried in a Christian churchyard when she has taken her own life? So they're arguing about, should she be buried here? Because if you take your own life back then, they do not allow you to be buried in the churchyard. Your body's left out and unsacrimoniously left to rot as a deterrence from that. The other one responds, I tell thee she is. Therefore make her grave straight. The crowner hath set on her and finds it Christian burial. How can that be unless she drowned herself in her own defense? Why, 'tis found so. So the official story is that Ophelia did not take her own life. Or if she drowned herself, it was in madness. So she didn't know what she was doing. It cannot be else. For here lies the point. If I drown myself wittingly, it argues an act. And an act hath three branches. It is to act, to do, to perform. Argal, she drowned herself wittingly. So here you see Shakespeare spoofing on the battle of wits, right? This gravedigger is presenting an argument and he's saying argal instead of ergo, as he's presenting why it is that it's ridiculous that Ophelia is getting a Christian burial when it seems she's taken her own life. Nay, but hear you, good man Delvert, give me leave. Here lies the water, good. Here stands the man, good. If the man go to this water and drown himself, it is, will he, nil he goes, mark you that. But if the water come to him and drown him, he drowns not himself. Argal, he that is not guilty of his own death shortens not his own life. So he's kind of pointing out the ridiculousness of the technicality of the person drowns either way, but only one of the drownings actually counts. And they'll continue with this debate as to whether or not Ophelia should be in this Christian burial. It's worth pointing out that they believed back then that if you didn't get Christian burial, you weren't going to heaven. So this is a big deal. This isn't just a technicality. This is like the afterlife. But is this law? Aye, Mary, 'tis Crowner's quest law. Will you have the truth on it? If this had not been a gentlewoman, she should have been buried out of the Christian burial. So there's like a bit of a change of the argument, or a tweak in the argument, which is that had Ophelia been a commoner, not a gentlewoman, she wouldn't be getting special treatment. Why, there thou sayest. And the more pity that great folk should have countenance in this world to drown or hang themselves more than their even Christian. Come, my spade, there is no ancient gentleman but gardeners, ditchers, and grave makers. They hold up Adam's profession. So the argument is like, yeah, you're right. Life's not fair. We're supposed to all be Christians, but we don't all get equal treatment. And now we're going to see a change in the topic. They hold up Adam's profession, Adam being the first individual in the Bible, the first human in the Bible. And Adam famously, in the fall into sin, had to work the ground. So he's kind of thought of as like someone who dug in the dirt, a farmer, the first farmer too. Was he a gentleman? So let me go back a bit. They hold up Adam's profession. Was he a gentleman? He was the first that ever bore arms. Why, he had none. What, art a heathen? How dost thou understand the scripture? The scripture says Adam digged. Could he dig without arms? I'll put another question to thee. If thou answerest me not in the purpose, confess thyself. Go to, what is he that builds stronger than either the mason, the shipwright, or the carpenter? The gallows maker. For that frame outlives 1,000 tenants. So before I get too far ahead of myself here, the joke with Adam bearing arms is like that he was the first to ever like take up tools, take up implements, but bearing arms also means like to bear arms that you use to fight with, right? Weapons, especially firearms, right? And the other clown points out that Adam did not have firearms, and then working back to the joke about Adam digging, the clown catches him in in a trap by saying that he's a heathen and doesn't know his scripture, because the scripture said Adam digged. And could he dig if he didn't have arms, like literal arms? So this, like, it's Shakespeare, but the humor is kind of like middle school humor, like just funny puns and being ridiculous and over the top. But the backdrop of all of this is a very serious conversation about the circumstances of Ophelia's death, how deaths are treated differently, and how actions in the world of the play do not end with the world, the mortal world, but extend beyond the grave. Obviously, that's a big deal to Hamlet and Hamlet's father. So now they're going to talk about who is like the best builder. So the other one says the gallows maker, right? The person who makes the gallows where the executions happen. For that frame outlives 1,000 tenants. I like thy wit well, in good faith. The gallows does well. But how does it well? It does well to those that do ill. Now thou dost ill to say the gallows is built stronger than the church. Argal, the gallows may do well to thee. To it again, come. So he's like, let's continue this battle of wits, this conversation. He's like, oh, the gallows is a good answer, but the church is a better answer. So you should get yourself to the gallows. Lots of puns here. Who builds stronger than a mason, a shipwright, or a carpenter? I, tell me that, and unyoke. So like unyoke your answer. Mary, now I can tell. To it. Mass, I cannot. Enter Horatio and Hamlet far off. Cudgel thy brains no more about it, for your dull ass will not mend his pace with beating. And when you are asked this question, next say, a grave maker. The houses he makes lasts till doomsday. Go get thee in and fetch me a stoop of liquor. So these clowns, these gravediggers, are clearly comedic, but they're a little crazy, but there's a method to the madness, right? Which comes up all the time in the play. And it's the perfect backdrop to what Hamlet is about to discuss with Horatio and with the gravedigger. I also want you to think about that answer of that the graves, the houses that the gravediggers make last till doomsday. See if that's actually true based on what we see in the next bit of the scene here. The other man exits, and the gravedigger digs and sings. In youth, when I did love, methought it was very sweet to contract, the time for my behoove. Oh, methought there was a nothing, a meet. Hamlet asks, has this fellow no feeling of his business? He sings in grave making. Custom hath made it in him a property of easiness, meaning like he's used to it. 'Tis even so, the hand of little employment hath the daintier sense, Gravedigger continues singing, but age with his stealing steps hath clawed me in his church, and hath shipped me into the land, as if I had never been such. He digs up a skull. So when they're making graves, they're not these like even little plots of land. There's just bodies kind of thrown on top of each other in the graveyard. Some of these places have people being buried there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Like some of these graveyards, I know when I got to go to Greyfriars in Edinburgh, Scotland, they talked about how it used to be like a valley, and now it's like hilly because there's been so much burial and so many bodies, like the topography of the ground is changed over the centuries. So there's got to be people moved out of the way when you put a new grave in. And this gravedigger who's singing while, digging a grave, which is like a very serious thing for most people, but for him is just his job. He chucks some bones out of the way, and one of them is a skull. So Hamlet picks up that skull, giving us the most iconic image, the actor holding the skull, the most iconic image in all of literature, or at least all of theater. Hamlet says, that skull had a tongue in it and could sing once. How the knave jowls it to the ground as if 'twere Cain's jawbone that did the first murder. This might be the pat of a politician, which this ass now o'erreaches, one that would circumvent God, might it not? It might, my lord. Or of a courtier, who could say, good morrow, sweet lord. How dost thou, sweet lord? This might be my lord such a one, that praised my lord such a one's horse when he went to beg it, might it not? Ay, my lord. Why, even so. And now my lady worms chapless and knocked about the mazzard with a sexton's spade. Here's fine revolution, and we had the trick to see it. Did these bones cost no more than the breeding, but to play a loggets with them? Mine ache to think on it. So we're still in prose here. Loggets is a game played by throwing pieces of wood at a stake. Oh, so kind of like horseshoes, and that's what the bones are being compared to, that they're just being chucked out of there, like you're throwing them at a target in a game. So we're still in prose here. We're not in verse. And in prose, we're all about logic. We're all about argument, as we've talked about. And the argument has shifted here because the gravedigger is just like ignoring them. He's like got a job to do. He's singing and chucking up bones. And Hamlet is saying, this could have been a lord. This could have been a courtier. This could have been so many people that once were able to sing and talk and have life. And now this knave, this fool, is just throwing them out like they're nothing. And Horatio is agreeing with him. But soon the gravedigger and Hamlet will have a bit of a battle of wits. And it's interesting to see who kind of comes out on top, the prince or the gravedigger here. The gravedigger sings, a pickaxe and a spade for, and a shrouding sheet. Oh, a pit of clay for, really bad these songs today. They're kind of confusing. Oh, a pit of clay for to be made for such a guest is meet. He digs up more skulls. There's another. Why may not that be the skull of a lawyer? Where be his quiddities now? His quillets, his case, his tenures, and his tricks? Why does he suffer this mad knave now to knock him about the scounts with a dirty shovel, and will not tell him of his action of battery? This fellow might be in his time a great buyer of land with his statutes, his reconnaissances, his fines, his double vouches, his recoveries. Is this the fine of his fines and the recovery of his recoveries, to have his fine pat full of fine dirt? Will his vouches vouch him no more of his purchases, and double ones too, than the length and breadth of a pair of indentures? The very conveyances of his lands will scarcely lie in this box, and must the inheritor himself have no more. So, not a jot more, my lord. Horatio is like agreeing with him, but maybe also telling him to let go of the argument. So he's saying this skull could have been a lawyer, and now he can't even sue the guy committing battery against him, right? The gravedigger who's chucking his bones all around. Or it could have been a purchaser of land, and now what land does he have? He just has the dirt inside his skull and nothing to leave to his inheritance, right? Like Hamlet is staring mortality in the face, and he's kind of having fun with it, right? Because prose is fun, the argument is fun, the trying to outwit one another is fun in Shakespeare plays and in everyday life. But there is some real like introspection here of what it means to have life, and what becomes of our mortal remains afterward. Not a jot more, my lord. Is not parchment made of sheep's skins? Ay, my lord, and of calf skins too. They are sheep and calves which seek out assurance in that. I will speak to this fellow. Whose grave is this, sirrah? Mine, sir. Keep singing. Oh, a pit of clay for to be made, for such a guest is meet. I think it be thine indeed, for thou liest in it. Well, you lie out on it, sir, and therefore 'tis not yours. For my part, I do not lie in it, yet it is mine. Thou dost lie in it to be in it, and say it is thine. 'Tis for the dead, not for the quick. Therefore thou liest, quick being the living here. And obviously we're getting like who owns the grave, and the gravedigger is saying it's his because he lies in it. And then Hamlet's saying like, well, you're in the grave, but you are lying right now because you don't own the grave, right? He's asking who the grave is intended for, but the gravedigger's like, it's my grave. Like I'm the one making it, right? 'Tis a quick lie, sir, 'twill away again from me to you. What man dost thou dig it for? For no man, sir. What woman, then? For none, neither. Who is it to be buried in it? One that was a woman, sir, but rest her soul, she's dead. So this is like a really funny back and forth. And the gravedigger is like kind of outsparring Hamlet here. And this is why I hate when people say, oh, prose is just what the lower class characters use. That's not true whatsoever. Here you see the prince using it. And he's not as good at it as the lower class person is. How absolute the knave is. We must speak by the card, or equivocation will undo us. By the Lord, Horatio, this 3 years I have took note of it. The age is grown so picked that the toe of the peasant comes so near the heel of the courtier, he galls his kib. How long hast thou been grave maker? How long hast thou been grave maker? Of all the days in the year, I came to it that day that our last King Hamlet overcame Fortinbras. So that's something that Horatio talks about, like in practically the first scene of the play. This history between Fortinbras and Hamlet. And by this point, we've kind of forgotten about Fortinbras. He's barely been mentioned. He shows up on stage to like walk off stage really quick to go invade Poland. And here we see a connection back to him. How long is it that since? Cannot you tell that? Every fool can tell that. It was that very day that young Hamlet was born, he that is mad and sent into England. So obviously the gravedigger doesn't realize he's talking to Hamlet, and Hamlet isn't giving away that he himself is Hamlet. Aye, marry, why was he sent into England? Why, because he was mad. He shall recover his wits there, or if he do not, 'tis no great matter there. Why? 'Twill not be seen in him there. There the men are as mad as he. That's a great joke about all the crazy people in England. And of course, you know, Shakespeare play performed in England, so I'm sure it brought the house down. How came he mad? Very strangely, they say. How strangely? Faith, even with losing his wits. Upon what ground? Why, here in Denmark. I have been sexton here, man and boy, 30 years. So he's answering very literally, right? How long will a man lie in the earth ere he rot? Faith, if he be not rotten before he die, as we have many pokey courses nowadays that will scarce hold the laying in, he will last you some 8 year or 9 year. A tanner will last you a 9 year. Why he more than another? Why, sir, his hide is so tanned with his trade that he will keep out water a great while. And your water is a sour decayer of your whoreson dead body. Here's a skull now hath lying you in the earth 23 years. So that's when he passes up the important skull. So Hamlet may not have picked up a skull, depending on the actor, may not have picked up a skull yet. This is the skull he picks up and that we think of. So that was my mistake saying it earlier. Little joke about how a tanner, someone who makes leather, won't rot as fast because he's been turning himself into leather based on his profession. I believe Shakespeare's father may have been a tanner. I would have looked this up earlier, but I just kind of remembered it. So I don't know, check it and write it in the comments. I believe he was a tanner, so maybe a bit of a joke about the family business there. Whose was it? A whoreson mad fellow's it was. Whose do you think it was? Nay, I know not. A pestilence on him for a mad rogue. He poured a flagon of Rhenish on my head once. This same skull, sir, was Sir Yorick's skull, the king's jester. This, even that. So they're guessing it, or Hamlet's guessing it who it is, and the gravedigger's like, oh, I remember this guy. He like poured booze on me once as a joke. It was Yorick, the king's jester. Yorick is the most famous offstage character, or I guess he's kind of on stage. His skull is on stage. But he's the most famous character who doesn't speak in all of Shakespeare. This, even that, taking the skull, let me see. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, most excellent fancy. Oh, he hath bore me on his back 1,000 times, and now how abhorred in my imagination it is, my gorge rises at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed, I know not how oft. Where be your gibes now, your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set a table on a roar? Not one now to mock your own grinning. Quite chapfallen. Now, get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick, to this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that. So that is the most famous, I keep saying the most famous, but it's Hamlet, everything's famous. It's probably the most famous prose line in all of Shakespeare. Alas, poor Yorick. This is his big speech that's not in verse. He's got some other big speeches not in verse, like the Quintessence of Dust one. But this is the more famous one for sure. And he's holding up Yorick's skull, and this is someone he knew, right? He talks about how funny and full of life he was, a fellow of infinite jest. Shout out, I don't have a copy nearby, but shout out the David Foster Wallace novel that most people use as a doorstop, right? It's a clown. It's someone who is meant to make people laugh and feel great and liven up the day. And here he's dead. He can't talk anymore. Not just that he's dead, but his jaw has fallen off. His lips are gone. And Hamlet is remembering the good times and amazed to be holding the skull of someone he knew. At the end there, he says, go to my lady's chamber, meaning Ophelia, and tell her no matter how much makeup she puts on, eventually she's going to die and look just like this, and see if that'll, make her laugh. Probably not, and not just because she's dead, but little foreshadowing. Prithee, Horatio, tell me one thing. Was it that, or what's that, my lord? Dost thou think Alexander looked on this fashion in the earth, meaning Alexander the Great? Even so, and smelt so. He puts the skull down. Even so, my lord. To what base uses may we return, Horatio? Why may not imagination trace the noble dust of Alexander till they find it stooping in a bunghole? That is talking about how Alexander the Great, like the dust that we breathe and is around us, could be the remains of him. That after life we return to base uses. We turn into dust, right? Twere to consider too curiously to consider so. That is a hard line to say. No faith, not a jot, but to follow him thither, with modesty enough and likelihood to lead it, as thus Alexander died, Alexander was buried, Alexander returneth to dust, the dust is earth, of earth we make loom, and why on that loom whereto he was converted might they not stop a beer barrel? Imperious Caesar, dead and turned to clay, might stop a hole to keep the wind away. Oh, that earth, which kept the world in awe, should patch a wall to expel the winter's flaw. Right, so basically, like Caesar could turn into the clay that you use to patch a hole in a wall, and Alexander the Great could be used to like stop up wine. A lot of these lines are cut because Hamlet's already a really long play, and these are not the most famous lines. But again, he's reflecting on no matter how amazing and seemingly godlike you are in your mortal life, this is what we all turn into. Enter King, Queen, Laertes, lords, attendant, and the corpse of Ophelia with a doctor of divinity. They do not realize yet that it is Ophelia's corpse, Hamlet and Horatio. But soft a while. Here comes the king, the queen, the courtiers, Who is this they follow, and with such maimed rites? The staff betokened the course they followed did with desperate hand foredue its own life. 'Twas of some estate. Crouch we a while and mark. So they step off to the side to watch what's happening and try and figure out what this funeral is all about. What ceremony else? That is Laertes, a very noble youth, mark. What ceremony else? Her obsequies have been as far enlarged as we have warranty. Her death was doubtful, and but that great command o'ersways the order, she should in ground unsanctified been lodged till the last trumpet. For charitable prayers, shards, flints, and pebbles should be thrown on her. Yet here she is allowed her virgin krantz, her maiden stewments, and the bringing home of bell and burial. Must there no more be done? No more be done. We should profane the service of the dead to sing a requiem and such rest to her as to peace-parted souls. So there's an argument between Laertes and the doctor about how much Ophelia deserves in burial. And the doctor of divinity, like the minister, the priest, is saying that they've already done more than she deserves. So what more do you want? And Laertes is like as his sister. He wants the best for her. He's pushing for the best kind of burial. But the doctor is saying her death was, what does he say? Doubtful. So like we're already going above and beyond for her. No more be done. We should have said that. Lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. I tell thee, churlish priest, a ministering angel shall my sister be when thou liest howling. So I believe that liest howling, yeah, in hell. So he's saying like she's an angel, you're going to hell. So Laertes calling out the fact that she's being judged so much just based on the circumstances of her death and not her life. And that, of course, with Hamlet and Horatio overhearing, clues in when he says my sister. Horatio, when Laertes says my sister, that clues them in and lets them know who has died. Hamlet to Horatio, what, the fair Ophelia? The queen says, sweets to thy sweet farewell. She scatters flowers. I hoped thou shouldest have been my Hamlet's wife. I thought thy bride bed to have decked, sweet maid, and not have strewed thy grave. So that's a wild thing to say, because there's some theories that Gertrude may have very well killed Ophelia. So she's just like talking out her butt right now, possibly. Perhaps the even more tragic interpretation is that she really did want Hamlet and Ophelia to be together. And so the warning that Laertes gave Ophelia and that Polonius drove home in 1:3, where he says, Mary, I'll teach you to think yourself a baby and do what I say. And Laertes said, like, you can't trust Hamlet. He has a longer tether than you. He can do whatever he wants because he's a prince. He's not going to marry someone like you. If Gertrude approved of it and Hamlet loved her, then her death, one of the things that led her down this path to madness and death was the overbearing conversation of Laertes and Polonius. That Laertes is partially responsible for this. Now, I don't think Laertes is mostly responsible for this. I think the blame mostly lies with Hamlet, for sure. But Ophelia is controlled by all the men in her life. She is not, as some pop music interpretations have suggested, rescued by a man. She's doomed by them. Laertes does not take kind to any mention of Hamlet, who he holds ultimately responsible for Polonius and his sister's death, his father and his sister's death. Laertes says, oh, treble woe fall 10 times, treble on that cursed head, whose wicked deed thy most ingenious sense deprived thee of. Hold off the earth a while till I have caught her once more in mine arms. So Laertes leaps into the grave before they can actually put dirt on top of her, so overcome with grief. And then he yells, now pile your dust upon the quick and dead, till of this flat a mountain you have made, to overtop old Pelion or the skyish head of blue Olympus. So Pelion, a high mountain on which in Greek mythology the giants placed Mount Ossa in their attempt to scale Mount Olympus. So Laertes calls to be buried with Ophelia, that he can't imagine living without her. So he's literally in the grave and saying, bury me alive with her. Hamlet believes this is the right time to crash the funeral. Oh boy. Advancing. What is he whose grief bears such an emphasis, whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes them stand like wonder-wounded hearers? This is I, Hamlet the Dane. Oh gosh, he says his own name. Laertes, coming out of the grave, the devil take thy soul. Thou prayest not well. And they grapple, meaning they fight, they wrestle. Oftentimes into the grave itself, like they're fighting literally on top of Ophelia's dead body. What an image. I prithee take thy fingers from my throat, for though I'm not splentative and rash, yet have I in me something dangerous, which let thy wisdom fear, hold off thy hand. Pluck them asunder, meaning like take them apart. Hamlet, Hamlet, gentlemen, good my lord, be quiet. Hamlet and Laertes are separated. And they're still, royally pissed at each other. Hamlet says, why, I will fight with him upon this theme until my eyelids will no longer wag. Oh, my son, what theme? We've also, I forgot to point out that we've switched back into verse when we get into the funeral. So we're in full emotion mode here. That we're no longer in the argument and the back and forth of prose. We are in full outpouring of emotion in the funeral scene. I love Shakespeare scenes that use both prose and verse in the same scene. It's always fun to hear the difference. Why I will fight with him upon this theme, blah, 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 my son, what theme? And Hamlet says, famous line here, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not with all their quantity of love make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her? So Hamlet is saying, I loved her more. I loved her 40,000 times plus more than you did. I will leave that to you to decide if Hamlet has the right to say that. Certainly I can understand his emotion. He didn't even know Ophelia was dead. Didn't know Ophelia had gone mad. Didn't know she died. Suddenly finds it out. Holds Laertes responsible, which makes me think that, he's aware that Laertes, he's definitely aware that Polonius is meddling in his relationship with Ophelia. I'm sure he has some suspicion that Laertes may have as well, or at least is very upset the way Laertes is talking about him, because in Hamlet's mind, he didn't do anything. I feel like he should figure out that, like, oh, you killed her father, and said some incredibly horrible things to her. But in his mind, she was alive when he was sent off. The king says, oh, he is mad, Laertes. For love of God, forbear him. Swoons, show me what thou'lt do. Wo't weep, woot fight, woot fast, woot tear thyself. Woot, okay, woot is weird. Wilt thou, I feel like you should say wilt thou, because no one's going to know what woot means. Wilt thou drink up easel, eat a crocodile? That line's got to be cut. That is undercutting the trauma. We just like Dr. Seuss that. I'll do it. Dost thou come here to whine, to outface me with leaping in her grave? Be buried quick with her, and so will I. And if thou prate of mountains, let them throw millions of acres on us, till our ground, singeing his pat against the burning zone, make Ossa like a wart. Nay, and thou'lt mouth, I'll rant as well as thou. So now Hamlet, now they've physically fought. Now Hamlet is having like a contest of who can outpour the most mythologically charged grief about Ophelia, who gives the best epitaph to her, I guess. The queen says, this is mere madness, and thus a while the fit will work on him. Anon, as patient as the female dove, when that her golden couplets are disclosed, his silence will sit drooping. Hear you, sir. What is the reason that you use me thus? I loved you ever, but it is no matter. Let Hercules himself do what he may. The cat will mew, the dog will have his day. And Hamlet exits. the king says, I pray thee, good Horatio, wait upon him. So like, look after him, take care of him. It's rich coming from the king. But then he says to Laertes, strengthen your patience in our last night's speech. We'll put the matter to the present push. Good Gertrude, set some watch over your son. This grave shall have a living monument, an hour of quiet. Nope, sorry, hold on. He's actually talking to... I think he's back to Laertes here. So he definitely goes off to talk to Gertrude. I think he's back to Laertes, not to the general group. He says, this grave shall have a living monument. An hour of quiet shortly shall we see. Till then in patience our proceeding be. Yeah, so he's talking about the plan. And the plan is, of course, to set up a fencing competition between Laertes and Hamlet, and that one of the swords will be unbaited, so it'll be sharp. And that's the one that Laertes is going to grab, and Laertes is also going to lace it with poison, so that if he even cuts Hamlet, Hamlet will be dead. So the king is reminding Laertes not to do anything rash right now. They need to stage it to look like an accident. And they already have a plan to do that, because they knew Hamlet was coming back. They just didn't expect him to show up at the funeral. Just wild. Wild scene. So yeah, that is 5-1. It is a long scene, but it's an important one. Got some very famous lines. Obviously, Yorick, major new name in the play. And then it sets up 5-2, which is the last scene of the play. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I'll do my best to get to them. And if you would like to support the channel beyond just watching and liking, which we really do appreciate, and that is plenty, but if you're looking to support more, we do have some field notes available in the description that you can get as wonderful stocking stuffers. And you get 10% off your first order if you use the code down in the description. And that comes back and helps out the channel. We also have a Patreon that I'm trying to add more things to. There's some extra articles. I don't really put videos out there. I don't really want to gatekeep like the educational material I'm trying to give people for free. But if you want to go deeper with some of this stuff, or read some of my articles or some of my graphics that I make for my classroom and my students, those are available on Patreon, as well as even for free on Patreon, you can vote on the next live stream. So that voting's already closed. The next live stream, not been announced yet, but I'll say it here if you've stuck around to watch. Next live stream is The Seagull by Anton Chekhov, which will start once Hamlet's done. But then after The Seagull, we'll have another vote. So if you're interested in picking the next live stream, check out the Patreon. You can be a free member and vote in the polls. So thank you again for watching. And again, any questions, leave them down below. And I'll see you in Hamlet's final scene. Thanks again. Happy reading. Thank you for confirming that his dad was a tanner. Appreciate it.